In the U.S., 1 in every 36 children are on the autism spectrum. That means either there's a child in your family or in your classroom with autism. But because it's a spectrum, that means every child is different.
There's a saying in our field and within families of kids with autism that if you know one child with autism, then you really only know one child with autism because it's such a broad spectrum.
We talk about what every family with autism wishes you knew and how to make sure your child is being inclusive.
Parents are their best role model for their kids, and so role modeling inclusion in their own lives.
We also show you an adorable theme park in Texas that is adapting the fun for kids on the spectrum.
Is that fun?
Yes.
That's today on Mom Squad. Hi everyone, thanks for joining me on Mom Squad. I'm Maureen Kyle. We've done episodes on autism before, and they are some of our most watched, probably because autism rates in the US are rising. As you heard me just say, 1 in every 36 children is considered to be on the autism spectrum. Boys are nearly 4 times as likely to be diagnosed with autism than girls. It can be diagnosed in kids as young as 2, but is typically diagnosed when a child is around 5 years old. These are just a few statistics from Autism Speaks. And what the statistics can't tell you is how families worry about their child with autism socializing at school or being accepted by their peers. It's something society is becoming more and more aware of, but we can all use some guidance about how to engage in a way that is helpful to kids on the spectrum. Allie Fisher from the Cleveland Clinic, who specializes in autism and works with families, sat down with me to talk about some of the myths, misconceptions, and what every family needs to know. Allie, thank you so much for joining us. I know a lot of families have questions about autism. I think we all, as our kids start to get into different schools and different play groups, we know somebody who has autism if it's not our own child. And I think a lot of parents tend to fumble over some of the language and some of the things we need to know about autism. So I'm so appreciative that you're sitting down with us today. And I guess just first and foremost, what do you think is one of the biggest myths or misconceptions when it comes to children with autism?
Yeah, so I think one of the myths about children with autism is that children with autism lack empathy or don't want friendships, and that's just not true. So children with autism can have empathy. They can have very deep and intense empathy, just like children without autism, and they definitely want friendships. They just might have differences in how they read emotions or social cues, and differences in how they go about their friendships.
Do you have any advice for, I just know, like, I even have a family member who's on the spectrum, and I remember watching him grow up and then interact with my kids. I was always, like, I didn't know how to prepare my own children for the fact that he might come across interacting a little bit differently. How would you prepare families with neurotypical children to talk to their kids? Like, if you know you're going into a play date situation, or you know that there's a kid who's going to be in the class, like, how do you help prepare your own child to let them understand the differences?
That's a great question. So a couple of different things. So first of all, there are so many wonderful books and resources out there. You can Google, how to prepare my neurotypical kid to have a play date with kids with autism. And there are so many great stories for different kids of different age groups. But I also think just cluing them into, this is a child where he might do things a little bit differently. So some children with autism might prefer to play next to a child rather than interactively with them. Some children with autism might have difficulties when someone breaks the rules or when there's a change in the routine or a big transition. And some children with autism might have some sensory differences. And so really cluing your kids in to what to expect. And another thing you can do is talk to the other parent first. What do they want you to know about their child? What do they want your child to know about their child? And then third, I think being a role model is really important. And so if your child is fumbling, or if they don't seem to know what to do, just jump in and role model, how to be kind, how to be compassionate, and, how to respond to some of these things.
I feel like I have to admit too, as a parent, I almost fumble talking to the other parent. I don't want to say anything that will offend the other parent of the kid who has autism. I don't want to step on toes. I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to offend them. Is there anything, like, as you work with families, is there anything that you hear popping up that you think families with children who have autism would want everybody to know? Like, what's okay, what's off limits?
That is a very difficult question because every kid with autism is going to be so unique and so different. There's a saying in our field and within families of kids with autism that if you know one child with autism, then you really only know one child with autism, because it's such a broad spectrum. And every child with autism is going to be different and unique. And so, I really think that families would prefer for you to just ask questions, ask what are the things that they're good at? What are the things that are hard for them? What are some things that you would want me to avoid? But I think some general rule of thumbs are to think about the symptoms of autism. So symptoms of autism are, differences in how kids communicate, how they read social cues, how they play, and their emotions, and then some repetitive behaviors. And so lots of kids with autism will have repetitive movements like rocking, flapping their hands, and then some sensory differences and difficulties with changes in routine. And so I think some things that aren't necessarily off limits, but things that we want to be mindful of and make sure that our kids and the kids that we have as parents of typically developing kids are aware that those are some of the differences, and to not, say, oh, look, he's doing this or she's doing that, and to really just accept individuals for who they are.
One of the reasons why you brought up the broad spectrum, and one of the reasons I reached out, because the Cleveland Clinic had this article that they put out there about not calling it high-functioning autism, which was kind of what spurred my idea of like, hey, there's so many ways that I feel like maybe I'm going to step on a toe, or like I'm going to make a misstep in talking about autism. Are we getting rid of the term high functioning? And if you can explain more of the spectrum and how we should be referring to it.
Again, another great question. And I think I also just want to say that, we're all going to make missteps. We're all going to make mistakes. And I think if we can own that, apologize for that, and kind of figure out ways to move forward, it's going to make, our community a better and more inclusive place. Mm-hmm. But in terms of high functioning autism, that is an outdated term. So this term used to be used for children with autism who did not have an intellectual disorder or an intellectual disability. But what that kind of means is we're saying functioning is all about intelligence and intellect. But what we know is that functioning comes from so many different areas: our creativity, and all of our other wonderful skills that we have. And all children with autism, regardless of whether or not they have an intellectual disability, are going to have strengths, things that they're really good at, and they're going to have areas that are difficult.
We are going to have more of my conversation with Allie in just a few minutes, but before we go to break, I wanted to share this story out of our Louisville station. It's a heartbreaking reality for so many families who have nonverbal autistic teens. Brooke Hash introduces us to the Maldonahue family, who had to move their son to a different state to get the care that he needs.
On a cold January morning in Louisville,
you ready to go?
A moment that could melt any mother's heart.
You want to give everybody love?
That's 15-year-old Frankie Maldonahue, whose months-long stay at U of L Health's Peace Hospital
Ready to go to the car?
had come to an end.
Get your coat on.
Peace was a familiar place for Frankie. He'd been here before, but this time,
Hey, let's get in.
he wasn't going home. At least not to the one he knows.
See you guys. Love y'all.
Love you.
Their SUV packed for the 11-hour journey to Wichita, Kansas. one they've looked forward to and dreaded all at the same time.
It's a bittersweet day.
Move-in day at Heart Spring, a place where children with severe neurodevelopmental disorders,
everything from autism to ADHD to learning disabilities,
can receive the care they need to become more independent. More than 500 kids across 17 states.
We get students from coast to coast. We have students from California to Kentucky, from Montana to Texas.
Some kids are here for outpatient services like speech therapy, as well as occupational and behavioral care.
1, 2, 3, switch.
Other kids need that care around the clock.
Every single day, we get so many phone calls for families that are desperate for services like Heart Spring.
Families like Frankie's. Rachel Maldovanu and her husband Bob made that call back in the summer in search of a place their son with profound autism could call home when theirs was no longer a safe place.
I'll see you after school. I know.
Frankie has grown too big and too strong to control. There are just a handful of facilities across the country specialized as a home away from home for Frankie and kids like him.
Go check it out. It's the gym.
This is his first time on campus.
Our school is for kids like Frankie who have had early intervention, but are now at an age where those behaviors are more challenging, more difficult for families and for school districts.
Frankie is also nonverbal.
Repeat after me.
Like many of his classmates.
Every one of them is very different, and you have to have individual plans.
All done.
You want to high five?
Rachel says it was easier when he was younger, but as her son got older, his needs changed.
Everything was fine until puberty, and then it wasn't.
He became aggressive and unpredictable.
And when they start attacking you in your own home, it becomes an environment that you can't sustain for anyone.
And with two young sisters,
You have to provide a safe environment for all of your children.
his family never dreamed they'd have to come this far to make it happen.
It's really hard when it's your baby.
As a parent myself, I can't imagine the agony these parents go through. It's very difficult.
I'm very thankful for Heart Spring and for Kansas, but I'm very sad that I have to leave my child 700 miles away. And that's not an easy thing to do as a mom.
Inside Frankie's new room,
Hand me the pen.
they unpack.
We're trying to make it feel like his home.
The photos go up,
11, 12.
the clothes go in drawers,
I told you I'm an overpacker.
and then there's that UK blue.
It's important for everybody to know that Frank is not a Kansas Jayhawk. He is a Kentucky Wildcat through and through.
Within the hour,
Look at him.
Mom, Dad, and Frankie's grandparents were already getting updates from his care team.
Those will be things that we look at as we do the evaluation and assessment. You know, what his self-care looks like. Fine motor looked really good today.
Found his spot, sat down, and it's like he isn't new, like he's been there this whole time.
We played basketball. It was great.
He's representing Kentucky well.
With move-in day coming to an end in Kansas,
How was your first day?
so does their time with Frankie.
Look, I got your old blankie from home. It's here. You gonna give Dad one more love?
Not goodbye,
I'm coming back.
but a see you later.
I love you. Come give me a kiss. You be great. Lord, please be with my baby. Keep him safe and happy. I love you.
If only a place like this existed back home.
My goal is to get Frankie's house built in Kentucky. Thank you all for taking care of my boy. I don't care if it takes me 10 years. It's gonna get done.
And that's a promise.
This is the start. This is day one.
Of course.
Love on him like a mom would.
I know, I promise. I promise. I promise.
Stay safe.
I know he's gonna be safe.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. This is yours. I'll walk with you.
Frankie and all the other kids in Kentucky deserve better.
Brooke Hash, thank you. When we come back, we get expert advice about how to handle those sticky teen years when socializing is at its most awkward. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we are taking a deep dive into what it's like for families with children on the autism spectrum. It's very likely that someone within your family is on the spectrum, or at least a child in your child's classroom. We've been talking with Allie Fisher from the Cleveland Clinic about what every autism family wants others to know, especially when it comes to socializing. We talked about play dates, and I feel like we kind of addressed the younger groups of. And that's almost, I feel like, easier, because when you know, your kid is in that age group and maybe the younger kids don't even really realize there's a difference. I have to imagine, tell me if I'm wrong, I have to imagine that the tween and teen phase gets very tricky for families and making sure that their kids are socializing and have a healthy social life. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, you know, socializing children who are neurodivergent is going to pose its challenges at all different age, but the teens and tweens, that is a sticky age because, you know, kids are developing their own identities, and they're also becoming more aware about differences between themselves and their peers. And so this is where some, you know, bullying definitely pops up more frequently. And can become more intense. This is when people are really consolidating their social groups. And so this can be a really difficult time for a child or, well, teen with autism.
So for parents, what is that conversation? Like, I know that one day I'd like to pull my daughter into a conversation and say, hey, you know, if you see somebody or if you know somebody, make sure they're included. You know, is that far enough? Or like, how do we encourage inclusion in those social circles, especially in those sticky years?
So I always am going to say role modeling. So, you know, parents are their best role model for their kids. And so role modeling inclusion in their own lives and, you know, reminding their kids, so, hey, you know, did you invite this person over? Did you think about this person? And so definitely being a role model can be a really powerful tool. But yeah, I think really just having ongoing conversation with teens about not only inclusion, but how, you know, people all have differences. And when we become friends with people who are different from us, we grow and we learn from it. And teens can be we all can really want to spend our time and be around people who are similar to us. But I think that's both a disservice to us and to our community because, like I said, you know, the more we are around people with differences and who are different from us, the more that we can learn and expand ourselves. And I think, too, I think that the more exposure children without autism have to children who are neurodivergent or have autism, the more they're going to understand it and not see it as anything that's wrong with it and more of just a difference.
Yeah, I know. That was such great information. I want to open up the floor to you because you are one-on-one with these families more than I am. And I want to get as much information out there as possible to any sort of family who, like I said, it's either in our own families or we know friends that have somebody who might be on the spectrum. What is it that you think that every family needs to know when it comes to being inclusive and having those conversations? Like, what is it that you hear the most from patients and their parents?
From parents, so I work a lot with parents of really young kids. And so one thing I hear a lot is that when they are out in public and their child is struggling because, you know, they're overstimulated or there was a big change or a big transition or something really out of the ordinary happened and when their child is struggling, they really are fearful of being judged. And I think that that's an experience that any parent can empathize with. And so really I think one thing that parents want is to have some empathy and some understanding from other individuals in the community when their child is really struggling. I think, another thing that families really just want, our community to become more educated about autism. And so, the more that we can read, do our own research, figure out more information about autism and learn about it, the more that we can understand these families.
Where do you think people can find those resources? You mentioned before books, but is there any go-to information that you think we should be checking out?
Yeah, so there are a lot of really great reputable websites. So one place I like to direct families towards is Autism Speaks. They have a lot of really great resources. Another resource that I think is great is called Milestones. It's actually an Ohio-specific resource that has a lot of great information. And so those are definitely two places that I would send families.
All right. Allie, this has been so great to hear your perspective and get information from you. I know that all of us have found ourselves in a situation where we're in that play date or we are going to the school function and seeing these interactions happen, and we want to make sure that our kids are inclusive and well prepared. So I really appreciate the information that you gave us today.
Yeah, of course. It was great chatting with you.
A big thank you again to Allie Fisher. As you heard Allie say, being inclusive is key to supporting these families. When we come back, we are going to show you a very adorable way that a theme park is adapting for their customers. Welcome back. This episode, we've mentioned how kids with autism can be sensitive when it comes to sensory experiences. A theme park would be one of those places that would be very difficult, but a new Peppa Pig theme park in Texas is showing how they can be inclusive to anyone.
With a target demographic smaller than
it's a tight fit
me
for a 6'5" guy,
it may seem like the new Peppa Pig theme park in North Richland Hills isn't for everyone.
All right, riders.
But step inside and you'll discover that it truly is for everyone.
I love being able to tell my friends in the autism community that this is a friendly space for our kiddos.
Heather Dearmore says for someone with autism, like her 7-year-old daughter, Acacia, theme parks can be intimidating.
Is that fun?
Yes.
Filled with sights, sounds, and textures that make it uninviting.
Yeah.
Julie Estrada, who works for Merlin, the company that owns the park, has seen it far too often.
Families would travel but don't because they don't think that the location that they're going to is going to be a good experience for their kids.
Heather says that's true.
We've never gone to a theme park, and we're from Southern California. We didn't do Disneyland or anything. It's just too overwhelming.
But Peppa Pig was designed differently.
Do you want to ride the boat?
Sensory guides allow parents to plan ahead, explaining how each attraction may affect their child.
Arr.
Most rides are either sensory friendly or handicap accessible.
Are you loving this?
And sensory activities are scattered throughout.
She could play in sand all day long if I let her.
But perhaps most meaningful, every staff member receives autism-focused training.
We really want our families to experience memories that will last a lifetime.
Thanks to the park's recognition as a certified autism center, this week, Acacia went on a ride for the first time ever. Followed by the second time ever.
One more time.
I knew you were going to say that.
Heather says these experiences will make Acacia more comfortable and confident, opening her world to so much more.
Like as a mom, you think, well, it'd be so nice to have a place like this, but you don't know if it's ever actually going to happen. And then here we are. So it's wonderful.
Wonderful. And by the looks of it, Acacia agrees.
Okay.
That theme park is in North Richland Hills, Texas, which is right outside of Fort Worth. Thank you so much for joining me today on Mom Squad. I'm Maureen Kyle. You can catch all of our episodes streaming now on your local news app and on our Mom Squad YouTube page. See you back here next week.